In 1917, Jerry Sage was born in British Columbia, Canada. During his childhood, he moved to Indianapolis, Indiana, where he attended North Central High School. After graduating from high school, Jerry Sage attended Washington State College in Pullman, Washington, and graduated with an infantry commission in the United States Army Reserve. Jerry Sage was recruited to join the OSS, or what is now known as the CIA, in early January 1942. Initially, he went to regular Army training during college and was promoted to lieutenant. After being recruited by Bill Donovan, also known as Wild Bill, the founder of the OSS, he trained rigorously at Fort Reed, Maryland, in hand-to-hand combat, parachute training, and weapons and explosions, and was promoted to major. In early 1943, he was deployed near Tunisia, Africa, as an operative to scout and assess the situation before American troops were deployed. His mission was to gain intelligence about Germany. Most of his information came from the English and was his own surveillance. Furthermore, in order to slow Germany's progress, Sage would use explosives to destroy enemy resources. After a few months in Africa, Sage was caught by the Germans and posed as a downed British pilot in order to avoid execution because he was an OSS spy. Sage was sent to a German prisoner of war camp called Stalag Luft III in the summer of 1943, which was located in either Poland or Germany. Jerry Sage spent most of his time in isolation, or the cooler, during his time of Stalag Luft III. Because of this, he was nicknamed the Cooler King. Additionally, he devoted his time to helping other soldiers escape. While Jerry Sage was at the camp, the prisoners composed a plan to escape. This plan was later referred to as the Great Escape. Essentially, 3 tunnels named Tom, Dick, and Harry would be dug underneath the buildings. The escape committee was run by British airman named Roger Bushell, who proposed the plan in the spring of 1943. His goal was to free up to 200 men, one of the largest escapes ever planned at Stalag Luft III. Sage heard of the plan and was determined to keep it a secret. While other prisoners were digging the tunnels, Sage made continuous attempts to escape the camp in order to mislead the watchguard's attention. In all, Jerry Sage escaped at least 13 times. Unfortunately, Jerry Sage was moved to Stalag Luft 13 before the tunnels were complete. However, because Jerry Sage had acted as a decoy for so long, the prisoners were able to finish the tunnel. Ultimately, 76 men escaped. However, 73 were recaptured and 50 were executed, including Roger Bushell, the leader of the operation. Eventually, Sage escaped from Stalag Luft 13 at the end of the war, when the Germans weren't interested in containing the prisoners of war, but escaping from the Russians. After returning from Europe, Sage was deployed to fight in the Vietnam War. Jerry Sage retired from active duty in 1972. By this time, he was a full colonel. After retiring from the Army, he became a high school civics teacher and won the Teacher of the Year award for South Carolina in 1979.
What is your relationship to Colonel Jerry Sage?
Staff Sergeant John Fowler. I'm the grandson of Jerry Sage on my mother's side.
How has Jerry Sage's character affected him as a leader?
Wow, he had such a can-do, don't quit kind of outlook on everything that really, I guess, more than anything, instilled confidence in the people that he was around. Just inherent leadership skills. I know there was one time when he was at Stalag 13, and he was trying to devise different ways to break out, just to cause more commotion and make the Germans commit more forces to fighting him rather than the war effort. And one of his good friends was a Scottish soccer player, and they arranged to have a soccer game in the middle of one of their days. And my grandfather told the soccer player, "Hey, go ahead and kick me in the ribs. Just trust me, this is going to work." So sure enough, in the course of the soccer game, this guy kicked him real hard in the ribs, definitely broke some ribs, which allowed my grandfather to be taken out of camp in an ambulance, and he already planned beforehand that he was going to break out of the ambulance, which he did. I mean, it's that kind of don't quit attitude that, instills confidence in the other people he was with.
What is the reason for his continuous attempts to escape?
Well, he saw it as his duty while the British were digging the tunnels to try to cause as many distractions as possible. So, in all, he attempted 13 escapes. The last one was the only one that was successful, but in his mind, really, it was just a matter of tying up the Germans so that they could dedicate efforts to finding him rather than discovering what the British were doing. That's his main reason for doing what he did.
How has Jerry Sage impacted the OSS?
Well, obviously he was a very active member of the OSS, even though he was in a prison camp for the bulk of the time that he would during World War II. But even afterwards, the OSS basically morphed into the CIA, and also there were many OSS elements in the establishment of the United States Army Special Forces in the early 60s, and he was one of those very first soldiers to be asked to help form the Army Green Berets. As a matter of fact, he ended up as commander of 10th Special Forces Group in Germany. All the way up until now, new Green Berets are trained at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and the actual course that they go through is named Robin Sage, essentially partially after him.
What is Jerry Sage's legacy?
Well, aside from the impact he had, just influencing countless number of soldiers and leaders in the Army, in his heritage in Army Special Forces, I'd say, another aspect of his legacy is the fact that, after he retired from the Army, he decided to dedicate his life to education. He worked at the University of South Carolina for a while, and then after that, he decided he wanted to teach high school civics. And, there's no greater testament, I think, to, the magnitude of his legacy, and that, he was voted High School Teacher of the Year in 1979. Just his ability to take the leadership lessons he learned from his military background and take that further and help it on the civilian side. I think that's probably the most impressive part of his lasting legacy.
Overall, Colonel Jerry Sage was a war hero of World War II that made the Great Escape possible. Throughout his lifetime, he demonstrated extraordinary leadership skills. By the end of his career, he became a colonel or one of the high-ranking officials in the Army. He was recruited to join the OSS by the head of organization and was one of the key components to allow the escape from Stalag Luft III to take place. Today, he is still remembered through his book Sage and portrayed in the movie The Great Escape. Furthermore, the course to train Green Berets, called Robin Sage, is named after Colonel Jerry Sage and another soldier. Colonel Jerry Sage made a large mark on World War II that continues on today.